You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Choctaw Nation. Now, the Choctaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. And finally, our third sponsor is 988. The Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is a direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. That's 988oklahoma.com. And now, let's get into today's episode. All right, cool. Well, let's have some fun, get into it. I know we got a little bit of time before we do the thing tonight with the Second Century Board, which I'm super excited for, and I know everyone else is as well. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about you. For people listening, please welcome to the podcast, Chief Gary Batton. Thanks so much for coming up.
Well, thank you, Mike, and halito, or greetings from the Choctaw Nation, from my native language.
I'm excited to dive into your history, talk a little bit about you. I think the goal of the podcast is to share all of the, the things that make you tick, all the intricate details, the stuff that people can't find out if they just read your bio. Well, we're going to dive into a little bit of your passion. Obviously, before we started recording, we talk a little bit about cars. You share the same passion for me. We love cars, and I grew up, in the UK, right? So muscle cars for me was not like I didn't see them ever, and when I first came here, you'd hear a V8 and you're like, what was that? And it was just a truck. You're like, no, I wish that was some classic Mustang. But, it's, I have been down, like I said, I played golf down at Chickasaw Point, which is down in Durant, and had some good times down there. I think I tried to hit a golf ball across the bridge when there was no traffic coming, which my coach did not enjoy watching me do that as a liability, but had some good times down there. And obviously people listening are very aware of the Choctaw Nation, and obviously you as well, of the great job you've been doing. But before we dive into, I guess, what you do now is your role, tell us a little bit about kind of you, where you grew up, and what was like your dream as a kid? I mean, what did you want to do?
Sure. I always say I have to start back for even before myself. So meaning that my grandfather and grandmother were both, on my mom's side, were both full-blood Choctaws. And so we grew up. My dad was from West Virginia, was in the military. They met out at Fort Sill out in Lawton. And, of course, I'm one of 4 children, my sister being the oldest and me being the youngest one, so I get to be the baby of the family, and they remind me of that all the time. But I was born, believe it or not, in Wichita, Kansas. My dad had gotten out of the military and was in worked for Boeing. We lived there at Boeing. We moved back and forth between there and where I'm not for sure if the listeners are aware of what's called original allotment of land. So my grandmother and grandfather both, years ago, whenever we came across the Trail of Tears, and all of this area was Indian territory before it became Oklahoma. And matter of fact, Mike, do you speak Choctaw?
Sadly, I do not. No.
Yes, you do. You
say Oklahoma. I did
exactly.
See that. Yes. I know what that means.
And so I always tease and joke about that. But whenever there was a period of time where, as tribal members, I always say you have to be careful what you ask for. So we asked for that we have our own land. Well, each tribal member back in those days got 160 acres each. So my grandmother's original allotment of land, her 160 acres, was down close to Clayton, Oklahoma. I still live in Clayton, Oklahoma, and but that's where her land was. And so if you can imagine, there was my grandfather's house, my cousin's house, our house, my uncle, my aunts, my other uncle, my other aunt, there was 20 of us that would get on the bus whenever the bus would stop by. So we grew up as a very close-knit family. And even though we would move off, even one time, my father working for Boeing, we actually moved to Seattle, Washington for a period of time. And but then we came back, and then they would have a layoff. Then we would move back to what I call home here, to Oklahoma at Clayton. And so everything was wonderful, great, meaning that we grew up in a small little church where all of my family and all of the, I don't know that I would call it the traditional Indian church, if you will, but probably 90% of the people went there was my family, so I would say it was an Indian church. But everything was great until probably about the time that I was 12. My mom and dad divorced. We were living in Wichita, Kansas at that time. Believe it or not, my older brother and sister, they had already graduated. They had kind of moved on. And then it left Joe and myself. He was 16 at the time. I was 12. We moved back to Clayton with my dad, which is the non-Indian, which moves back into this Indian village, if you will, of where I grew up. And of course, my dad thought the world and all of my grandfather. And there's little stories that I think of that really kind of shaped my life. And one of them that I have to tell real quickly is about my dad, which was, of course, he was European, and he was down in the field. And he got the pickup stuck, and my grandfather was with him. And my dad tells this story. Of course, my dad's passed now, but back then he did. And so he would, just shove the pickup up into reverse, spin backwards, shove it and drive, spin forward, all those things. And finally he just got out, slammed the door, and he said, well, I'm going up to the house, which is probably maybe a mile away. He said, I'm going to go get the tractor, come back to pull it out. Well, when he came back, my grandfather had gotten the pickup unstuck. He had stuck some limbs underneath the tires, and it just rolled out. And my dad was like, what in the world? Did you not tell me that you could get this pickup unstuck? My grandpa said, you never asked. Yeah. And my grandfather was the full-blood Choctaw, never said very few words, but was so wise that I just loved and cherished him. But going back to the time when we moved back down there, and then my dad was working at for the Clayton law enforcement, and he ended up having a wreck that paralyzed him from the chest down. And so he was in the hospital. My mother was still struggling with the divorce in Wichita, Kansas, which left kind of Joe, which was 18 at that time, and then I was 14 at that time, to kind of live by ourselves. And he ended up committing suicide. And so I don't tell that story. It's a very emotional story to me, but I tell that story because it's what shaped my life. And the reason why I say that, because from that point on, for about 6 months when I was 14, I lived by myself. And so if it wouldn't have been for my family, and then later on, I met my wife. I was 15. She was 16. We're still married today. Been married 35 years, but she always says that really we've been together 40 years because we dated 5 years before we got married. Yeah. And then when I was a senior, and so after living by myself for a period of time without food, I did have running water because it was on a well, but it was cold water and all those things. And so I feel like I can relate. I have a whole lot of empathy for people that goes through, because, a lot of times people think, well, why did they put themselves in those situations? Well, a lot of times you get put in situations that you don't understand why, and you don't know why they happen. And so that part, and then all of the people that helped me. I had cousins that let me live with them. I had a family by the name of the Holtz that took me in and let me live with them for a period of time. My wife's family, even though I was not married to her at that time, let me move in with them when I was a junior. And thank God that by the time I was a senior, and I go back to people helping me. D. King owned a grocery store, and of course, you don't think about those things at the time. He was a Choctaw. He allowed me to work in his store in the mornings. I'd go to school, work after school, and I was able to get my own apartment and live by myself and do all those things. And then when I was a senior in high school, I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. My old pastor from when I was a kid showed up at the parking lot, and he said, I said, "What are you doing here, Brother Bob? I hadn't seen you since I was like 10 years old." And he said, "I'm here to check on your spiritual life. Your father had called me." My dad was in the hospital in Memphis, Tennessee at the time. And so I remember that very clearly. And my point with all of that story, though, is if you really want to know what drives and makes me tick, it's because of those years of, I can remember, she wasn't my mother-in-law at the time, but I remember going up to her. Is the second time, you have to realize I grew up in a family, Choctaws are very stoic. We don't really say a whole lot. I'm probably the abnormal part of that.
That's the opposite of who you are, right?
But a part of that is because I felt like I had to grow into part of that. And so, but the second time that I met her, I went and picked up Angie, my wife, for a date, was she gave me a hug. And I remember just going, what is this lady doing to me? I remember almost leaning back because I just didn't feel comfortable because we didn't do those things. But they helped shape my in-laws helped shape my life a lot too, because they were the loving, caring, loud, boisterous, just talk and have a good time and just express their emotions and tell whatever's on their sleeve. They just tell it. Not us. We just sat back, and whatever kind of came your way, you just dealt with it in your own way and moved on. And so all of those things, I feel like, helped me be the leader that I am today, which is, I'd like to think that I'm very caring, empathetic. I can fit in their shoes. You're never better than anybody else. People ask me, why do I still live in Clayton, Oklahoma? It's very rural, and it's because I'm Gary there. It's yes, I can say I'm the chief. I'm the 47th chief of the Choctaw Nation. We have 12,000 employees, all those things. But at the end of the day, when I go back home, I get to be that person that's just a good friend, a good neighbor. And so all of those things, I think, hopefully keep me grounded from being humble to and being that empathy and going back. I know this is probably for me it means a lot, but I think about when they asked Jesus, they said, "What's out of the 10 commandments? What are the 2 greatest?" And he said that there shall be no other God before me, and you shall love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. And if you can make it that simple, that's what drives and motivates me. I always knew that ever since the people that helped me, I always wanted to help people. I just did not know that I would have such a blessing to become a chief and to be in this role and to have all the things that's happened to me. To be where I am today.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, and obviously, there's no doubt the why you can relate to people because of the experiences you had as a young guy, but also the age that you're at when all of this is going on is such a pivotal age in a young man's life, right? Like, if I think of myself and people listening, like, if we were 14 years old and that happened and you got to live on your own, like, the odds of most of us surviving in today's world, it's incredible to go through that, but also to go through that, and because when people are in those situations, like you said earlier, that you always think, well, how'd you end up in that situation, right? But it kind of downward spirals because you're in that position. You're in a place of, it's a weak place to be, right? You have a lot of self-doubt, and you make decisions based on short-term gains. You don't make decisions on, in 10 years I'm going to be this. You scrap and fight for everything you need because you're living day to day.
Yes,
right?
but Mike, I think the part and that's where I consider that I'm just blessed, or the good Lord was looking after me, because I remember during that time, and that's the reason why I believe in this word empowerment. I remember thinking, well, this is horrible. I remember probably depressed, I don't know, but I was just thinking, this just sucks. This situation that I'm in, I am hungry, it's just, why did this happen? And I remember in my mind, though, one day saying, the only person that can change this is me.
Yeah.
If I want something, I'm going to have to get off my butt. I'm going to have to get up. I'm going to have to do something. I can't sit here and be pitiful and have self-pity and all those types of things, because it gets you nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I had to think a little bit longer term, because I knew that I wanted a job. I knew I wanted to go to college at that time. And so you have to start thinking. I had a Choctaw, full-blood Choctaw, tell me one time, he said, you know, when you're down and out, the main thing is to look up.
Yeah.
And if it's amazing, if you will look up, you start seeing that, because when you're down, you see the just horrible mess that you're in. But if you do look up, as soon as you look up, I mean, like now, I see grass, I see the sun shining. You start noticing all these things, and you start understanding there's a whole world out there that's beyond you. And I know it's crazy, but my dad used to tell me whenever I was younger, he said, you know, you revolve around the world doesn't revolve around you. And so anyway, it's just some of those little simple things like that really has kind of guided me through my life. So
where does that, when you have that moment, you think, you know, like, the only person that can get you through this is you, like, where does that come from? You know, because you've obviously had people in your life up until that point that shaped that. Where does that come from?
Well, I truly believe, you know, I tell that story, but I do think it's because I had a solid foundation. You know, my mother and father were very good people. They were solid. You know, did they have their struggles later on? Yes, they did. But when I was younger as a kid, and I believe this, and of course, you know, at the time you don't think about it, but I do reflect back on it now. But when a child is from born to the time they're 6 years old, they say that you develop the majority of your personality and what you will become. And I believe that, because there was something in me, I didn't know what at the time, that just told me, you know, if you want to do this, you have to do it. I do think it's because of that solid footing that I had. That, and it's interesting, you know, it's, most people, I don't know if you get older and you realize that, but the simple things about my dad saying, you know, the world doesn't revolve around you. And so, and again, I knew that I had to get up. I remember him telling about taking responsibility for your own actions, and those little simple things like that, you know, just when you're sitting there all by yourself, all these thoughts and emotions are running through you, you have to go. Those things that's what comes to your mind. It's because you've been taught that foundation, and I truly believe that's what got me through that.
So you going through high school, like, you already have this idea that, hey, I'm going to go to college. What's kind of like your plan at that time? You know, did you have an idea of what you wanted to be, what you wanted to study in college, or just thinking, I'm going to go to college, I'm living in this area, I'm going to go to Southeastern, that's going to be my next challenge?
Well, and I would say that, I don't know if this is a good thing to say or not, but and what I mean by that is that sometimes the things that you don't like motivate you as much as the things that you do like.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I felt like the education was critical to my success. Everybody that I knew that was successful had an education. And so I did not know what I wanted to be or anything else, did not have a path other than I just knew that I was going to strive for that. I was very fortunate, again, because of people. Had a great counselor at our little school there, took me to Southeastern Oklahoma State University, took me to the campus, showed me around, everything else. You know, and I keep saying, people, I think, sometimes take things for granted. You coming from the UK, probably, they was telling me, well, you need to go by the bursar's office, you need to fill out a Pell Grant. You know, I'm thinking, what is all this stuff, you know? And of course, and as a kid, you think, man, all these things are just, you're the only one that doesn't know, everybody else knows. And so going back to learning to, and that's the reason why I keep saying, I do believe in this a lot. And what I mean by that, if you hear me talk, you probably hear me jump all over the place because everything is interconnected for me. But I remember that, you know, I had to speak up, though. And I used to be that quiet, shy little Choctaw boy. But until you go, I'm sorry, Mr. Archer, I don't understand what a Pell Grant is. Well, guess what? He starts explaining it to me. Then he starts explaining it to, I don't know what a bursar is. So it was really, I don't know if it's pride that makes us not want to do that or what, but overcome that pride. I had to learn to be educated, not just from, you know, a college education, but just from a social education. And so again, when I knew it was me that had to do it, it was me that had to speak up. And if I don't do it, and I firmly believe that now, if I don't speak up for our Choctaw people, who's going to? I can't sit and wait back for somebody to take the lead. Yes, there is times when I need to shut my mouth, let somebody else take the lead.
Right.
But I'm the leader of the Choctaw Nation. I'm supposed to speak up for our people, so I need to do that.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Last night we were a couple of us on the board here, the Second Century board. We were on a panel for the teen board last night upstairs, and there's 6 of us on the panel, and Emily did a great job of kind of emceeing it. You got these great high school students in front of us, and they're all the next generation of smart Oklahomans. And every time she'd ask for someone to ask the question, like nobody would ask a question. And I'm on the panel thinking, like I'm 32 years old, like why is nobody asking a question, right? But then I think when I was 18 or 16 or 17, like we didn't want to put our hands up and be the only one, right? It's so weird to us. But now, you get, you think, well, why didn't I, right? It makes so much sense. But then, you got to put yourself in those shoes of like, is it pride? Is it insecurity? Do I think I'm going to ask a dumb question? And probably, you go back and you think, I should have asked more questions in school. Right?
It's probably all of that, that makes you do that. That's the reason why I was saying that I felt blessed from the time I was 14 to 18. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I didn't go through the down times. I drank a lot of things that, the kids shouldn't do. And I was dealing with all of those issues, but I felt like I went through that at a very young, I was so thankful that I went through it at 15, 16 rather than 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and my point being is I felt like I was forced to mature. So probably when I was 18, I remember people always telling me they thought I was in my 30s when I was but I did hang around older people, but a lot of that was to gain knowledge from them. It was to understand. When I was in 8th grade, I ran around with seniors in high school. That was my buddies, and but I do feel like, again, that was a blessing to be forced to mature, even though I hated it, fought it, went through all those things of people. I thought people looked down upon me, because I was poor, this poor, inconsiderate little guy, and come to find out, people were just maybe actually turning and looking, so it wasn't that they were looking down on me. They were just literally turning their head. And so, forgiving yourself, forgiving, the whole situation. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever gone through those situations. Anytime somebody goes through these, I call them trials and tribulations, you really do a lot of soul searching and finding out who you are and what really drives you and what does motivate you, as opposed to when you're younger, it's probably more about what you hate and what you did. I wanted to leave Clayton. As soon as I left Clayton, I thought, never going back. Well, guess where I live today? It's Clayton. Yeah. So it's all those things. But again, I think understanding what my values were as a young person really helped me a lot.
Yeah. So like you said, when you accepted, Christ into your life, was that pretty pivotal moment for you then?
Oh, it was the most pivotal. Yeah. That turned me from being that negative, what are you looking at? Why are you even focusing on me? I just wanted to punch everybody in the face, to, hey, that life's okay. Life's going to be good. It's not going to be perfect, right, but I'm going to be able to make it through this. Not everybody's horrible. Maybe I've been seeing things in a different light. That's why I was saying I think forgiveness is a big thing. Forgiveness of myself and forgiveness of people probably that they didn't even mean intentionally do anything, that maybe I took it to heart, something that they said that I was never going to turn out to be any good, and so things like that. And so it was, it turned me from being negative to positive, and just looking at opportunities in front of me. Like I said, going to college, I started saying, okay, what do I need to do? How do I get there? Who do I need to talk to? Before, it's like, I'm not talking to nobody. I'm not going to do that. If they want me to go to college, they'll come talk to me. It's just weird how your mindset, but yeah, it changed me inside and out.
Yeah. So you went on to college, you did business management, is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
Why business? Why did you choose that?
Because at the time, I thought I need to go into the most diverse area at that time. Now, this is 1985. And so, and again, I had great people, my advisor at the time. So I knew that even 7-Eleven, any place needed a manager. So I could probably get a job somewhere. But then also at this time was when, I was one of the very few people that had typing in high school.
Oh, okay.
And so when I was in college, he said, you need to take computer science. So computer science was my minor, and then accounting was my other minor. And he said because computers, he says, is the wave of the future. The way I got my job with the tribe in 1987, my wife and I married in January of 1987. This is my second year of college. Went to work for them in June. And they hired me because purchasing department needed a person that could run a word processor. I had ran a word processor in the class. Matter of fact, I was only one of the only guy in this entire class. All the rest were females. I hated that class. No, it's the greatest class ever. So it was that, and so I was able to run the word processor, 10 key. And also I delivered supplies. At that time we had 110 employees within the Choctaw Nation as a whole. And so that's how I was able to get in.
Yeah. And that goes on, you kind of do that. And I guess at this point you kind of, you have a purpose, right? You feel like I'm doing something, I'm doing something with my life, I have a purpose, I'm earning money, I'm on my own. Like it's, I guess you're off to the races at that point, right?
Well, not necessarily, I would say, at that time, because at that time I would say, my wife and I newly married, so it was about survival, making sure we had a job. When I graduated college in '89, and then at that time, I went to interviews and I wore a suit that day to work. And it's like, what are you doing wearing a suit today? And I was like, well, I'm going for an interview. And they said, you're not staying with the tribe? And I said, well, I would love to. Is there an option? And I think it was the next day or two that the chief actually called me down to his office, and he said, I would like for you to go oversee our housing authority as the deputy director. There was a director and then the deputy director. And so I said, sure. So I went there. At that time, we had 37 employees. And then I felt like I had a purpose. And the reason why I say I felt like I had a purpose is because people needed housing. But I was very fortunate, again, because of my background, to know just a house does not fix your problems. So you also need social workers. You also need all the supportive services to surround you. I remember going to a Choctaw, full-blood Choctaws place one time. He was living in a chicken coop. And so I helped him fill out the application, filled it out myself. He could barely write. Eventually got him a house, a 1,200 square foot brick home. Guess what? 6 months later, we go out to do an inspection. He's living in the chicken coop still. In the house, he has potatoes where he had gotten out of his garden, all in that house. And my point being is that made me even more so realize that just getting a house is not good enough. I should have done a better job of educating, hopefully him understanding what it is to be a homeowner,
right,
and all those things. And so, but I felt like I was helping people build about 2,000 homes while I was there. And for people that desperately needed the homes, I grew up in an Indian home, as we call those. And so it's critical. It built communities. Yeah. And just like us, where we grew up, there was 7 homes that was Choctaw Indian homes, yeah, that was built by our housing authority. Now, I didn't build those. I was younger. But then to build 2,000 homes and to continue that, I just loved it. And I loved the hands-on of going out and getting to know people's personalities, what motivated them, why did they want to be a homeowner, all those things.
Yeah. Did the chief at the time know your background at that time?
No.
So he had no idea of the way that you grew up and like how that shaped you, but also how that served you in relating to these people getting new houses for like.
And what was interesting, it was probably all the other staff that advocated on my behalf. So the lady that was over purchasing at the time, she ended up getting cancer, which was my boss, and they always joked that I was her secretary because I typed and filed and and did all those things. But then she reported to the chief financial officer, and the chief financial officer is the person that saw me that day and said, "You're not leaving us." And she's the one that went and spoke to the chief and said, "We need to keep this young man." But I would like to think that I had a good work ethic, a positive attitude, a willingness to learn, those simple values that I would like to think that helped me stay with the tribe.
Right. Especially during that time where, like I said, there was 11 or so employees at that time, right? And now there's 12,000.
110 employees.
Sorry.
But we have over 12,000
and you're
now.
You recently graduated from university. Like that's, when we look at people now, putting you in that role, if you look back, I think I was 22 years old, right? Like, I don't really hear that very often now. Like now it's like, you have experience and you got to do your thing. And I wish we could go back to that. You'll learn on the job. We trust you. We've got a great team around you. You can do this.
Well,
right?
I harp on it even today that, I don't oppose. I mean, I love people with college degrees, whether it's BA, bachelor's, master's, whatever it may be, doctorate. But, at the end of the day, you're looking for a skill set.
Yeah.
What is that skill? Ability to communicate, or is it willingness to learn, whatever those things are. And I felt like back at that time, that's what people looked for, and we still do it today. It's just we weed out a lot of people because of degrees before we ever get to the actual personality traits that we're really looking for in this job. Honor, integrity, those are the things that you're really looking for. It's not that you're looking for a master's and somebody that will steal from you, and I'm not saying people with masters do that, but my point being is back then, I remember when I went there, I was the youngest employee there. Matter of fact, their insurance policy went up because I went to work, and I was second in charge there. And the first person that I had to discipline was a lady that I would say was just like my mother. She was a full-blood Choctaw, strong-willed, determined. I mean, a lovely lady at the same time, but just sometimes her delivery wasn't the best. And I remember thinking, I didn't hardly sleep a wink that night because of thinking of how am I going to go in here and tell my mom, that you need to improve, you need to do better. Thank God she accepted it. Of course, again, same thing says, how would I want to be treated? Went in, treated her with respect, honor, dignity, talked about the facts, not about her, but just about the facts. And anyway, it worked out for me. And she's passed now, but she was one of my greatest friends and supporters later on.
Yeah. So how long are you in the housing side of things before you move on into a different role?
I was at housing from 1989 to 1996, and then I went to healthcare. And at that time, we had a chief that had went astray, and then Chief Powell became the chief at that time. He asked me, he always knew because my dad, he knew that situation, and he knew that I was in and out of hospitals. And it's interesting when you're in and out of hospitals, the ones that deliver good service and have good patient care and all those types of things. Yeah. So he always knew that I had that passion. And so he asked me to go to the hospital. So I went there, and then asked me to build the first ever tribal nation hospital in the United States. And so at the time, if you can imagine, I know people see the tribes now with casinos and everything else, that project was going to cost $28 million. And I went to the bank and actually had to get a loan. Of course, thank God we never had to borrow that money to draw down on that line of credit, because our travel plazas, we were in bingo at the time. Yeah. It started picking up and our tribe started doing better, that we were able to pay for it. But it was, for me, it was a challenge that I love to challenge. I like to say I'm a Tushka warrior. I love sports, so I'm a big time competitor. Okay. And but I had from August, I think, of 97 to complete it by June of 99. 126,000 square foot facility, me not knowing that much about healthcare. So I'm struggling with, so how do I get the doctors on board with this? How do I get radiology? And of course, again, it goes back to what do you think I did? I went and sat down with them and said, well, so how should we build your radiology department? They started designing it, and I had to push, motivate, inspire, shove, all those types of things. But we got it done in June of 1999, and the push for that was Chief Powell was running for first time. He fulfilled that the last term. This time he had to be elected, and people were saying they will never build a hospital. They just never will, and we were able to get it done.
Yeah, especially to be the first one in the country.
Yes,
that's a pretty big impact to have, and you go back to what you said earlier, I think, about just empowerment and empowering people and putting people in the right places and going to the doctors and saying, this is going to be the place you work at. How would you build it? What do you want us to do for you so that we can complete this? And you can get a lot done when you ask people what they would like, right?
Exactly.
Instead of saying, no, I'm doing this. This is my way or the highway.
Or get it done. We have to get this done. But it's a matter of just simply sitting down and asking and respecting them. And, and I always say that you think about, the negative side of my life and the positive side. When I was, and that's the reason why I keep saying I cannot separate things, and I apologize sometimes when I ramble. But whenever I was 16, again, you have to realize that me and my current wife was dating. And so, we ended up, the coach wouldn't let me play basketball. I ended up with a knot that came up on my neck, is about 1.5 inches. And so he said, you need to go to the doctor. So I go to our hospital that was located in Tallahassee. It was that old hospital, go to the ER. Of course, he wouldn't let me be seen because I needed an adult to sign off. So now, at the time later on became my mother-in-law, she comes over and she signs. Well, the doctor comes out and he said, well, I hope you know this could be cancer. So at 16, I'm just like, okay, I guess this is it. This is it for me. Life's done, and I guess need to accept it and move on. Yeah. And my mother-in-law said, we're not accepting this. And so she paid for me to go to another doctor. I had mono. Yeah. And believe it or not, my wife, girlfriend, Angie at the time, did not have, she'd never got mono. And I did not know this. Mono can be, most people know it as kissing disease, but you get it from stress. And that's the reason why I had such a huge knot on my neck. But anyway, so I go there, take some medication a week. I'm great and so on. But my point being is that really motivated me. And that's the reason why I believe in business management. But there's always a vision and a mission. And my vision was to become the best rural healthcare in America. And because I didn't want another 16-year-old to have to go through and worry that they're going to die and have cancer. Right. We deserve better than that. Our people deserve better than that.
Yeah, and to not take that for an answer, right? To be like, we're going to go get another answer here. Like, this is, for something as serious as that, I mean, it doesn't have to be serious, but just that we should go and get multiple answers in anything that we do is a smart thing to do, right? But sadly, there are people who get those answers from authoritative figures. I'm terrible with words, and they take that as this is it. That's my diagnosis. Then and that could have spiraled, and who knows what could have happened. Right?
And that's the other part that I would encourage people is to be that disruptor.
Yeah.
Don't accept the status quo. Mm-hmm. And my wife always tells me, and she jokes about that. I tell her I'm a Tushka. She says I'm hard-headed. But the point being is that don't just accept the answer. She always says, you always ask why all the time. And it's just, I don't know, maybe it's because of my background, but you can always do it better. You can always do it quicker. And I know that's that competitive nature in me too. But I think it is important because we do have a tendency to accept things because that's the way it's always been done. Right. They are authoritative figures, so you better not ask that question. No, you better stand up again
Yeah.
Better stand on your own 2 feet and find out for real so that you don't make a bad decision.
Right. Yeah. So you have this facility is built. You're a successful project. You're done. You want to what is the next project then? Because obviously you're doing this. You're in this role for quite a period of time, right?
Yes, from 2007 to 2014.
Yeah.
During that time, to create the best rural healthcare in America, I wanted to have a facility in rural America. Is you have to be at least within 30 minutes of a clinic or something. So we started building clinics because access to care was the number one problem that I had. So we built a clinic in Idabel, one in Stigler. We also, I believe in a public health approach. So it's not just primary care. So we built a new recovery center, which is for people with alcohol and substance abuse. We built Chihola Lee, which means I love you in Choctaw, for mothers and children that have alcohol and substance abuse problems. We built McAllister Clinic. We built a diabetes wellness center. Was able to do all of those things in regards to healthcare. And then, like I said, in 2014 became the assistant chief. And then again, Chief Powell at that time asked me to develop kind of the first economic development plan for the Choctaw Nation. And at that time, I was trying to remember the exact amount of money that we had within the tribe. It was in the millions, but it was not great. I know millions are great, don't get me wrong, but in regards to the amount of tribal members and everything, running a full tribe. And so we built a casino in Durant, one in Grant, one in McAllister, and one in Stringtown. That was a $375 million economic development plan, which paid for itself in less than 5 years and really got us even more seed money to then grow and deliver more services to our tribal members. And so we also developed a veterans advocacy program during that time. I was trying to think. We expanded. We started doing loans through our housing program. We started providing all kinds of different care. You probably if you've read, from ortho to ear, nose, and throat, not just on that side, but we started what's called emergency services program. There was just a lot of different things that we couldn't do in the past because we just didn't have the money. And just to give everybody a little bit of history, because of our treaty that we signed, the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek in 1830, which is still alive today. I want to make sure everybody understands that. Has been proven by McGirt and Castro Huerta, if you're aware of those cases, but that those treaties still being alive today, they were supposed to provide health care, educations, and social programs. Well, the federal government provides about this much of that. Right. And so, same thing. Who is it? Can I sit around and wait for the federal government to fulfill that? Yeah. No. Or can we step up? Like I said, it makes me go back to when I was 14. Who's going to step? We have to step up. Yeah. We got to step up. We got to create more jobs. We got to provide more services. And that's what we were able to do.
Yeah. And by doing this and growing this, obviously you built a great relationship with Chief Pyle, and, eventually you end up taking over, right?
Yes. And Chief Pyle retired, actually stepped down in 1965, and so I fulfilled a year of his unexpired term, and then I ran in 2014, and then just like I said, I've just been blessed. To even be inducted in the Hall of Fame. People want to put a lot of this credit to me, but it's really the credit of my team. I always say that I've just been blessed to understand, going back to what you said, of putting the right people in the right seats. And sometimes, yes, have I made maybe some misguided steps, but having the right people in the right seat, man, they just flourish. They do great. And, all you have to do I like to think, again, because I love sports, you just have to be kind of that coach and say, we can do it. And they'll come up with all the ideas. They will. So we have grown, to a multi-million-dollar organization as a tribe. We've been able to put money back in what we call a sustainability fund. My goal is to have a Harvard endowment model. And so if we can achieve it, I think the last date that I have was 2032. If we can continue on, we'll have an endowment model, which means the tribe won't ever have to worry about being in gaming. If something happens with gaming or anything else, we will be able to sustain our tribe the way that we should. We'll never lose our language. No, we'll never lose our culture. That's my goal for the future.
Yeah, it's exciting, right? And going through the journeys and the times in your life where you have uncertainty, and then you kind of, like I said, you accept Christ, you find your calling, you find a job, and you think, I'm going to go find another job because this is, and you have this time, right? And you probably didn't think, I'm going to be chief one day, right? That probably never crossed your mind.
Never crossed my mind.
But you have these things along the way that, by hard work and doing the right thing, and in the roles that you've had too, it's all about helping people, right? Which is the signs of a great leader, isn't it? You're helping people, you're empowering people, and you're giving people an opportunity and giving them basic things, right, to survive, but then empowering them to kind of follow their dreams and do, taking care of the basic things first, right? Housing, healthcare,
education.
Education. So they don't have to worry about that stuff, so that they can pursue, a passion and a dream that they want to go do.
Well, and I think there's, again, going back to this medallion that I wear in full circle, I think there's got to be a balance with that. You've got to have something that motivates and inspires you. You don't want to provide, it's just like, and I'm not saying I want to treat our tribal members like my children, but I want my children to be hardworking, ethical, honorable, all those things, trustworthy, but you have to let them develop those things. If I would just give them everything, they may not develop those. So they have to have their own struggles a little bit. And so it's a critical and a lot balance for our people to have to go through, anybody. I'm just saying not just our people, but anybody, to go through those critical experiences, I call them. I had a critical experience, just to grow from that and to learn from that. And then you will appreciate a simple value of trust. If it's something like trust or honor, you will start going, hey, that person has it because you saw when you didn't have it.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things, going back, what you mentioned also is, you were inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. And I think the sad thing is that you're inducted during COVID, which you didn't really get to enjoy the night. But the question I want to ask you is, because you emceed last year's with Governor Anatobi, which I was there. You guys had a blast on stage. I never thought I'd see Governor Anatobi be an MC, which we joked about that as well, because you guys are totally different in that way, right? You're very outgoing, and I can totally see you on stage, whereas he's more reserved. But the two questions I want to ask you is, what was the time, when did you find out you were going to be inducted? And then the second question to follow up is, how much fun did you have actually in that room on the day being the MC?
You mean being inducted into the Hall of Fame was the first question?
Yeah, first question, yeah. How was that?
I was trying to remember. I think Shannon had called me, and of course, it was, if I remember right, I was at home because everything was locked down at the time. And, I remember after she, of course, I'm just like, thank you so much, Shannon. That's such an honor, and all those things. And then when I finish, you think, what have I really done, to get into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, I guess, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but you always see these people up here, and I see myself down here. And so I didn't see myself as a Hall of Fame recipient, because it's just, you do what you do. You don't do it because of getting inducted to the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, but it was truly an honor. And I think, am I really at the scale of these leaders that I have? Governor Anatobi, Mike Burge, Chief Pyle, all these people have been inducted. Reggie Whitten, that I was just talking about earlier, just saying, these are wonderful people that's had a huge impact on my life and other people's life. And I'm just going, I don't know that I see that. Yeah. But again, it was very heartfelt though. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. Getting to be on stage with Governor Anatobi, I thoroughly enjoyed that. And the reason why I thoroughly enjoyed it is because I felt like I am a little small town guy from Clayton, Oklahoma, so I get to represent rural I get to represent the Choctaw people. And, also Native America, and to understand and feel that Oklahoma maybe does appreciate, Native Americans and their contributions that they made to the state of Oklahoma. And so, yes, for me, Blake Shelton was there that night, and so on, to be on stage with people like that. It was exciting just to see a superstar as Blake Shelton, and I've got to know him a little bit. But for me, it was really just important to know that that one was probably more excited than when I actually received the Hall of Fame award. And the reason why, again, is just because I felt like I got to represent Gary Batton. Not that the other one wasn't, but it was more about building a hospital, which, again, I'm very proud of, building casinos, all those types of things. But this was just who Gary was. It wasn't Chief Batton. It was Chief Batton. Don't get me wrong. I'm one of the same. But it was Gary Batton that got to be on stage representing who he was. And so, I loved it. I love, of course, being Governor Anatobi. We get to joke and we get to carry on. And a lot of people say that, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I get to pull a little bit of that sense of humor out of him. And we, of course, we joke with each other and jab at one another. And because for the most part, he's a pretty serious businessman. He
is. And that's kind of like the perception that people have of him, right? When you meet him, he's very quiet and he's obviously, done a great job. And I know you guys have a great working relationship, but you probably don't get to cut up as often like you did, last year at the Hall of Fame on stage and joke around and take public jabs at each other, right? And make because it was a lot of fun. I was cracking jokes and having a good time and laughing. Really enjoyed it.
And what's interesting is I get to do that with him off stage or on stage. And so that's the reason why I've always appreciated Governor to let me be me, because he could say, hey, young man, that's you don't need to be doing that. But he's always just, joked and just made a jab back at me, which I love.
Yeah, I sent him an email and said that we were sitting down together and asked, is there anything that I need to know, anything I need to talk about? And he did reply glowingly, which I'll show you after we finish recording. You can read his response. But he said he has a lot of respect for you, and he said, while we don't always agree, our working relationship has been consistently good, and I believe him to be a great leader of the Choctaw Nation. So I'll show you the rest of it because I don't want to bore you with, and the people listening, with his entire paragraph, because he did send a paragraph back about your relationship and how you guys work together. But that's exciting to have that relationship with you and all the other tribal leaders, right? You've got to have that unity and come together. And you're going to have your differences. Who doesn't have their differences, right? But when it comes to just standing up for yourselves and doing it as a unity and coming together, like, that's important.
But that's, I think about tribes, and we say sovereignty, and state is a sovereign state. But even you, Mike, you're a sovereign person. I'm a sovereign person. Just because we disagree doesn't mean that we don't fit under this umbrella of still finding things that we can work together on. And I don't. This is probably a political statement. That's the reason why I think we have so much voter fatigue. I know for me, I have such voter fatigue of, I'm sick and tired of hearing that's a Republican issue, that's a Democrat issue. I'd like to say, how about this be an Oklahoma issue for once? How about this be a people issue for once? And so I say that because I do think that we're losing that. I think we're losing the issue of respect for one another. I keep saying, sure, I appreciate everybody's uniqueness. In this day of inclusivity and all those things, I think, why is that? The reality is we should appreciate everybody for who they are. And because we can easily find those differences and separate us, but we're all Americans. We're Oklahomans here, and my goodness, I would like to think that we could come together. And so, I say that, but and if you don't mind me, I would like to encourage everybody.
Yeah.
We've got critical elections coming up in November. Get out and vote. 28% of the population voted last time. Yeah. I think about our veterans. I know I get passionate about this, but we had code talkers that used our language to end World War I. We've had people that has fought for this country like crazy, and they've given up their lives. Yet we won't go vote. just because they gave us the honor of allowing us to vote, and we won't even take that responsibility to go vote. And I know that's me. I get passionate about it, but everybody, please step up for your veteran. Step up for Oklahoma. Go out and vote. You know, even if you don't do it that way, do it because the negative side of it is say you have no right to gripe if you don't go vote. But whatever motivates you to get to vote, just get educated. I don't even care who you go vote for. Right. Go vote. Be involved.
It's sadly I mean the numbers speak for themselves, right? 28%. It's you know the generations that have come, you know, aren't speaking to those World War veterans. They don't have a family member who fought in World War II or in Vietnam or all these other. So there's that separation, right? So you got to figure out, you know, why do you want to vote? What do you want to vote for? Well, and also I think the sad thing is that people think, oh, my vote's not going to count. But then that word spreads around, and you have, like I said, you have maybe 20, 25 of your friends that all think the same thing. Well, collectively, that's 25 votes, right?
Exactly. You know, we had an election for state representative in the Durant area, Bryan County area. 67 votes decided that.
Yeah.
If there would have been 30% of the population voted, that could have changed. And I'm not saying for bad or
it's one busload,
but yes, exactly. I mean, and to me, you know, I just think about you know, all the issues that's facing us here in America today. That if we don't get involved in, and what's even worse is they claim that the further you get away from history, the more things are forgotten. So, you know, I wasn't in World War I. I wasn't in World War II. I wasn't in Korea War. But, you know, I was young when Vietnam War was going on. But my point being is they said people attended church more and people voted more after 9/11. And it's kind of sad that we're going to need
a disaster
in America, and then people will say, we better step up and do something. Right. Let's be proactive. Let's change it now rather than waiting until something bad happens.
It's like that. You know, if you use that sentence and you make people proactive, and the sad thing is when you put politics in the mix, people automatically say, nah, I don't want to be involved with that, right? But if you were to say, hey, if we all come together and we vote on this, we can change something that's going to happen in our town, then they're all in, right? But the second you mention the word politics, it's just got that bad kind of connotation or bad kind of stigma around it, right? But it's just educating people.
Well, it is educating people, and it is a responsibility of us. Sure. As I hate calling myself a politician, but I am elected. But the reason why I say that is because if you have relationships with people and friendships with people, it doesn't become political. Political, in my opinion, is when I go, Mike, you do this for me, man, I'll do that for you. That's bad. Yeah. But if I'm just going, Mike, hey, man, I'll help you out anytime. You're going to help me out when I need it. That's just being good neighbors. That's being good friends. And that's the way it should be. But we've gotten far away from that.
But, I mean, to that point of helping people and being there and being present with people, I asked, before we did this podcast, I asked a few people, you know, kind of, what should I talk to you about, and just how do you see, you know, Chief Batton and stuff like that, and one of the quotes comes back is that you're the people's chief, meaning that you're always out in the community and you're not always dressed in a suit in your presenting front, right? You're in shorts and t-shirts shaking hands. So I can't imagine how tough COVID must have been for you, right? Saying I can't really do anything, I have to stay locked down, we've got to stay locked down to come on this side of it. And, you know, this last year must have been the happiest year of your life because you're just like, sorry to your wife, you're out all the time saying, you know, being at every engagement and having a good time and shaking people's hands and being in front of people.
Well, you know, I guess going back to the balance thing in life, you know, when COVID hit, it was really I'm high charged, as you can probably tell, but at the same time, I know that you have to disconnect at times, and that was a great disconnect time. I got to go fishing with my grandson so many times. We got to eat dinner together, my wife and us at home, you know, so all of those, so I cherish those things. You know, did I miss getting out and seeing our people at the same time? Yes. Did I accept Zoom and you know, WebEx and all those types of things? Yes, I do. And do I think they're a wonderful tool? Yes. But no, matter of fact, I block time once a month, it just automatically, to go out and be with the community, because those are the people that I represent. And the worst thing I think you can do as a chief or as any leader is become disconnected with who you represent. So it's important.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, regardless if you're in an elected position or not, just being in front of people and being out there and meeting and putting, you know, even if it's just going and watching a football game together, right? Like you mentioned, you love sports. I assume you're an OU fan, which isn't good right now.
No, I still am an OU fan at this point in time.
You know, but just having those occasions, right, that kind of bring us together, whether it's sports, local football teams, or baseball, basketball, whatever it is, you know, that kind of brings you together, and win or lose, you know, you still have a good time, right? Like there's something special about that.
Well, I've always said, you know, when you think of the Olympics, when you think of things like that, music and sports usually always bring people together from all. Matter of fact, last night we had what's called the Global Citizen of the Year Award with the Happy World Foundation, and we had people from Guatemala. We had people from Mexico, if I remember right. We had all different types of dances that were being performed, as well as we did some of our traditional Choctaw dances. And it was so beautiful to see all these cultures on display, but at the same time, you know, united for a good cause. And so, anyway, to me that's what I love.
Right. Yeah. Finishing up, I mean, obviously OU football is a passion of yours. Depending on, I mean, it doesn't matter how good they are, like football's a passion. Where does that OU passion come from? Why was it OU and not OSU or somewhere else?
You know, it's just growing up as a kid, my grandfather, my family, it's just automatic. You know, they're OU fans. I think I'd be kicked out of my family and so you just grow up with that passion that OU is. Again, it's about what they stand for. That OU magic's going to come through. At the end, you know, they're going to fight hard. They're going to, you know, try to be their best. That's the reason why my whole family was OU fans. It's, again, you'll have good seasons. You'll have bad seasons. You'll have, just like now we're having ups and downs. But I hope that our culture of who we are as OU never changes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, last few questions. Something that's a little quick fire, that's a little different to, you know, just to finish up, so people get to really know you.
Sure.
What is your favorite movie?
Favorite movie, Forrest Gump.
Really?
Yes.
Why is that?
I just love the historical nature. Of course, as you could tell, you know, Forrest Gump grew up. He was disabled, you know, all those types of things. Even though some of it, is it luck that he got where it was? Is it by, you know, was it just a blessing of God that he got where he was? The people that impact, you know, I guess I can kind of relate it to my life, but it's such a historical, good story. From that perspective, he had trials, tribulations. I love more realistic movies, and so even though that one had probably some unrealistic parts, but it was about his life and his journey of those ups and downs, and yet he was still able to even stay positive during all those times.
Yeah. What is your favorite song?
Favorite song?
Or do you have a favorite song at the moment?
Can you narrow that down to genre? That's because it's
What do you listen to? What's the kind of what genre of music do you like to listen to?
Oh my God! Now I'm going to sound like I'm schizophrenic. So I think of Metallica. You know, I think of gospel music that I love. I like country music. I like some classical music. I mean, pop. You know, I mean, I love all of it. It just depends, but. I don't know, man. There is so many songs that comes to my head that is again, if you would have to say country music. Goodness, I think of Travis Tritt, and because he's kind of the blues and all those types of things. He sings "Long-Haired Country Boy." I think is one of my favorite songs. Like I said, when I do think of like harder core, I think of Aerosmith, "Walk This Way." But then I think of Def Leppard, and I think of different ones because I was an '80s kid.
Has there been anyone that's come to the nation to perform at any of the casinos, any of the locations you guys have that you're like, wow, I never thought this would happen?
When Travis Tritt came, he signed my guitar because I played the guitar, and so that was a big thing. And again, the reason why I think I like Travis Tritt, he's never had a number one hit per se. He's had like, I don't know, 30 or whatever, you know, great songs, but he's still from Georgia, just a good old humble country boy, and I just love that about him.
Yeah.
But his heart, the songs that he sings are just so heartfelt.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite restaurant or a go-to meal?
Wow. Favorite restaurant? I don't have a favorite restaurant, probably. Probably my go-to meal, probably sounds weird, but it's my favorite because it just reminds me of family and makes me think of Thanksgiving. As we always have deer meat, we have beans, we have fried potatoes, we have usually homemade biscuits with all of that. And so that's probably my favorite meal just because of the time of season, and it's always a family gathering.
That sounds so good right now. That sounds amazing. What do you kind of finish that off with? What dessert do you guys go for during finishing that meal?
My favorite is probably pecan pie. Or cheesecake. Either one of those two. I love those.
Yeah.
And probably, if neither one of those are available, I'm probably a little Debbie Swiss cake roll type of guy.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. You might have some of those on your doorstep.
Okay.
Some people listening might want to thank you for a few things with those cakes. But is there anything that you're Googling right now that has your interest that just... I'm
Googling.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's so many things that I Google from people that I want to make sure that I understand and know the issues that, wow. I think one of the things that I've been, just because of the tribe, and so I don't mean to go into this too depth, but we've had this huge growth, this journey of growth for the last 20 years. And so I always think about, so what does the next 20 years look like? And so I've been studying on disruptors, and because the life cycle of any organization, it'll grow, and then you will get to the peak, and then you'll go through what they call the valley of death again, and then you'll start your next life cycle. And so I think we're getting close to the end of that, not meaning the tribe ending, but just gaming.
That cycle, yeah.
Gaming is becoming where it's not such a monopoly. It's becoming more competitive and so on. Who knows what Texas will do as far as gaming. And so anyway, I just think about, so how do we go back and look at what we're good at? How do we disrupt what we're doing and become really focused and do the things that we're really good at? So that's been a focus of mine, is just really understanding. I try to look, so I can only imagine that we're going to be 15,000 employees before long. We're going to be, an $800 million a year company, organization, tribe. And so I always try to go find those people that's already done that. And so Google a lot of those different things. I'm going up to another tribe here before long to visit with them. And so I do use Google, but it's only to find those resources, but I'm still more of a face-to-face. I'd rather go see how they actually did it.
Yeah. Do you have a guilty pleasure or something you're slightly embarrassed about admitting that that's your go-to? You like to, keeps you up at night, and anything that stands out?
Probably just Netflix, just in general. I mean,
what are you watching right now?
Well, as you heard, I'm a fan of real life, so I watched Nolan Ryan's story the other night. I did watch the Jeffrey Dahmer story the other night, which is kind of freakish and kind of weird and kind of interesting. And I tell everybody that was almost like a train wreck, and but I couldn't quit watching the train wreck. And so that's probably, I get on those stupid things like Cobra Kai, and it's like, up at midnight watching it, and I'm like, why am I up at midnight watching? This is so cheesy, but I keep watching it though, So anyway, I guess that would probably be it.
Is there anything that comes to mind when people ask you, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Well, I would probably working for a nonprofit somewhere that is purpose-driven. I could work for a for-profit company as long as they were purpose-driven. I serve on a couple boards, and the two boards that I serve on, both of them are very purpose-driven. It's not financially driven, and so I could work for some places like that. that, or I would be in the mission field probably.
Looking back at the life that you have up until now, is there anything that stands out as a like, that was my best life moment? And it doesn't have to be best, but it's just a moment that was really stands out for you.
Well, of course, I think about I don't mean this in, again, just simple way, but when Angie and I got married was a very critical time, and probably even more so when we were dating, that she would stick through me through all those bad times that I was going through. So marriage, I adopted both of my children. So Stacy, we went and picked her up at a convenience store. My son, I went and picked up at a Walmart. And it was legit. Just even though I say that, right? But it's because that's where we had done all the central paperwork and everything. Yeah. But it was just a central meeting point. Yeah. And so I think about that. Of course, like I said, the day that I got saved was the pivotal point in the happiest day of my life. And so, and as you get older, I think just the simple days of just getting to sit with family and just, not really have pressures of doing anything, those days are really special as I get older. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and finally, I know we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but something fun. What is your dream car? What would you have if you could snap your fingers and it would be there tomorrow? Which one would you have that you would just drive till the wheels fell off?
Wow. Again, that's so tough. First thing that comes to mind is 1968 Dodge Charger. Yeah. The reason why I say that is my cousin had a 1968 Dodge Charger, and we were racing, me and my cousin were racing another two guys. He had a 68 Camaro, and of course we smoked them. And but whenever we were racing on top of Sardis Dam, it's a dam, and scares me to death now that I think about it. But when I went past that dam, there was people there, and I was going probably about 110, and they started backing out, and I had to slam on my brakes, and people were walking, and but anyway, it was the 68 Charger though and it wasn't mine. It was a cousin's that he actually just let me drive it, and so it was just unbelievable to feel that speed, and plus it's sleek. It's kind of a bigger car, as you probably know, but I'd love to have one of those.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming up early. I know you're going to speak to the Second Century Board this evening, and I really appreciate you coming up early to spend an hour to tell some stories. People get to know the real you. They get to see that, and I don't doubt that they already know the real you, because obviously you share and you're out in the community a lot. But it means a lot that you come up here and share some stories and talk about the impact and the life that you have and everything that shaped you, because it makes so much sense now what you do and what makes you tick, and the way you empower people, the way that you going through the housing, in that and having that impact, and now to being chief, and it's it all makes sense, right? When you explain it for an hour, right? But when people get to shake your hand and probably have a 5 or 10 minute interaction with you, they probably won't get it. So this is the reason I love doing this, because we get to share people's stories, at depth and hear it from them. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And for people listening, we will catch you next episode. Cheers.
Yakoki, which is thank you.
Say it again.
Yakoki. Yakoke. Okay. But the E is an E. Yakoki.
Yakoki.
Very good.
All right.
Chukma, that means good.
All right. Yakoki and Chukma. I'm learning. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Choctaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And finally, our third sponsor for today, the Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is the direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with the trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. It's 988oklahoma.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.